Welcome to InappropriateFolktales.com. Here's your host, Sean Buvala.
Once there was a hunter making his way down the road. As he did so, he tripped. He looked back to see what he had tripped on, and he noticed there in the ground there was a shining white stone. Such a thing as a shining white stone is not something that you would see all the time. And out of curiosity, he turned around and he began to dig at this shining white stone that was there embedded in the ground. But as he dug and dug, he discovered that it wasn't a stone at all. It was actually a skull. He pulled this skull, this human skull, from the ground, and he lifted it up so that he could look into the dark eye sockets. When he did so, the skull began to talk. It was as if tongue and tendon, muscle and mouth had been restored, for the skull began to speak of here and now, of time and treasure. Treasure. It told the hunter that not far from where they stood there was indeed a treasure buried deep in the ground. But then the skull gave the hunter one final warning. Do not speak of these things of which I have spoken to you. Speak not of the treasure. Speak not of the truths that I have brought to you. Speak not of these things, for if you do, you too will join me someday here in the ground. And with that, the skull stopped speaking. Well, the man took that skull, and he buried it back in the ground. He went not far from where he had been, and there dug into the ground, and there discovered indeed a trove of gold coins, to which he took, and he lived off of. It did not take the people of the village very long at all to figure out that the hunter now had more money than he had ever had before, and they would ask him, "How did you come to all of this money?" Ignoring the advice of the skull, he spoke. He said all the things that the skull had told him. He spoke of the treasure that the skull had told him of. And word of that did not take long to reach the ears of the king. The king came to the hunter's home, and he said, "You, sir, will show me where this skull is, so that I may claim this knowledge, this treasure for my very own." Well, the man took the king to where the skull was, and he dug up that skull. He took that skull and he lifted it to his own eyes, and there he stared into the eyes of that skull, waiting for tongue and tendon, waiting for muscle and mouth to again speak. But the skull said nothing. He begged the skull, he asked the skull, he pleaded with the skull to speak, but the skull said nothing. Well, the king was so angry that indeed he thought this hunter must have been fooling him, or thought he was a fool, that he took his sword and he cut down that hunter right there in the road and left his body to rot. A generation later, at least, when the story of the skull had long been forgotten, another hunter came walking down that same road, and he, too, tripped over something on the ground. When he turned around and looked, there were two bright white stones in his path. And he thought, how unusual to see stones like this on the ground, and he began to dig them out. But I'm willing to bet that I don't have to tell you the rest of what happened to him, do I?
You've been listening to Something Uncomfortable from InappropriateFolktales.com. Copyright 2016. All rights reserved. For more information, visit us online